Welcome to the Luma Clinic's podcast series, The Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex info and bring you some surprising facts and key insights. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something that affects so many people, often in ways we don't fully see, with overlooked complexities, but also some amazing strengths. We've been looking at sources exploring the relationship between ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and dyslexia. They're distinct conditions, right? But they often show up together and can really impact learning daily life, but maybe offer unique talents too.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to shed some light on how they overlap, where they differ, those subtle but really crucial differences, and most importantly, how understanding all this better can lead to, more effective support and maybe even help us celebrate the unique strengths they bring.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. It's actually amazing how often ADHD and dyslexia are found in the same person. Our sources show this huge overlap. Something like 18% to 42% of people with dyslexia also have ADHD. And if you flip it, dyslexia is apparently the most common condition found alongside an ADHD diagnosis.
It's really striking. And what's fascinating, I think, is that even though they're separate neurodevelopmental disorders, conditions affecting brain development and function, their symptoms can look really similar sometimes. They get confused.
How so? Like what gets mixed up?
Well, attention difficulties are a big one. Both can cause problems with focus, but the sources point out a key difference for dyslexia, those attention issues. They're often really tied just to reading and writing. It's the sheer effort of decoding words that drains their focus,
Okay.
Whereas with ADHD, that difficulty sustaining attention can pop up in almost any task that isn't immediately super engaging for them. Chores, conversations, homework.
Right. So it's less about attention in general and more about the context.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I saw something else interesting in the sources about how the order things get diagnosed can actually differ between boys and girls. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The research suggests that boys, who maybe more often show that outward hyperactivity, restlessness, impulsivity, finding it hard to sit still, they tend to get diagnosed with ADHD earlier on.
Okay.
But girls, they might lean more towards the inattentive side of ADHD. It's quieter, maybe daydreaming, disorganization, trouble staying focused without it being super obvious. And because it's less disruptive, maybe it can get missed or misinterpreted.
So they might get the dyslexia diagnosis first.
Exactly.
Okay.
Before the underlying ADHD is spotted. And of course, this difference in when and what gets identified really impacts the kind of help and support they end up getting.
So given how complex this all is and these differences in how it looks, especially across genders, what do the sources say about actually helping people effectively? I mean, can you really just treat one without considering the other?
That's a really critical question, and the sources are pretty clear. For interventions to be truly effective, you really have to address both conditions at the same time.
Simultaneous.
Yeah. Think about it giving someone with dyslexia a really wordy checklist to figure out ADHD symptoms. It's just setting them up to struggle.
Right. That wouldn't work well at all.
Or putting a child with untreated ADHD through really intensive reading drills for dyslexia. Their struggles with focus might just make it impossible to actually absorb the reading help. It leads to frustration, not progress. You need that integrated, holistic approach.
Okay, so treating them together is key. What kind of practical strategies did the sources mention? Things that actually work for people managing both?
Oh, there's a lot out there, thankfully. The research highlights things that really understand how these brains work differently, like breaking learning down into shorter chunks, maybe 10, 15-minute activities. That caters to the ADHD brain's need for novelty.
Okay, short bursts.
Exactly. And incorporating physical movement, surprisingly, that can boost focus for some. Also encouraging self-directed learning, letting them follow their interests a bit, and definitely building in regular breaks to avoid overwhelm.
And these aren't just for kids in school, right?
Not at all. These ideas translate into really useful life hacks for adults, too. Things like visual planners to help with memory, auditory reminders, mind mapping for organizing thoughts. Even simple things like ergonomic pens or keyboards can make a difference if writing is physically uncomfortable, which can drain focus.
And technology seems like a big piece of the puzzle, too, based on what we read.
Oh, absolutely. It can be a total game changer. Tools like Speechify, which came up in the sources, are a great example. It basically reads text aloud, books, articles, PDFs, whatever, so you can listen instead of struggling to read.
That sounds incredibly helpful for reading fatigue.
Huge difference. And you can often adjust the speed, too. Speed it up if you're really engaged, or slow it down to really absorb tricky information. It gives you control.
But it's not all about overcoming the difficulties, is it? I was really struck by how the sources emphasized the unique strengths that come with ADHD and dyslexia.
Yes, definitely. That's such an important part of the picture. People with dyslexia often show amazing creativity, curiosity, really strong imaginations, maybe because their brains are wired to think outside the box, make connections others don't see.
And ADHD.
Well, folks with ADHD can also be incredibly creative, really open to new things, and capable of this intense hyper-focus on subjects they love. They can dive so deep.
That hyperfocus can be like a superpower sometimes.
It really can. It turns what seems like a challenge into a different way of solving problems, a different way of seeing the world.
And when you think about people like Bill Gates, Albert Einstein, Whoopi Goldberg, the sources mention them, right? All had traits of both conditions. Their stories really drive home that these aren't just deficits. They can be linked to incredible creativity, resilience, maybe even genius. Their achievements weren't despite these differences, maybe partly because of them. So we've really dug into how intertwined ADHD and dyslexia are. Shared struggles, yes, but also these unique strengths. And it highlights this critical need for support that's comprehensive, personalized, and really celebrates who the person is.
Exactly. It's about seeing the whole individual, not just the challenges, fostering their confidence, celebrating their diverse abilities, moving away from seeing it as just a deficit towards recognizing the potential and strength there.
So thinking about these uniquely wired brains, what's maybe one key takeaway or a shift in perspective you hope our listeners consider? Something about unlocking that potential rather than just managing the difficulties. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on the Lumi Clinic's podcast series. Stay tuned for more insights on our next podcast. And you can always visit us at lumiclinics.org.